for any of the panelists, and at the end of the chat, we'll get to it. So I thought it'd be good to kick off with some of the intros of the panelists. So why don't just a little bit about your name, background, and your mentoring. We can start with Tyson and go from there.
Sure. Hi, my name is Tyson Mao. I'm a product manager at Google. I graduated from Caltech back in 2006. I'm actually classmates with one of the other panelists. I first started off my career in in finance and high frequency trading. I did that for about 4 years before switching over to product management. I've been mentoring Jeremy Navarro, who's a student at Middlebury College, and he's been looking at product management roles.
Awesome. Thanks, Tyson. How about you, Fabio?
Hey guys, my name is Fabio. I'm currently a grad student at Columbia, the Industrial Engineering and Operations Research Department, doing my master's, not PhD. I grew up in Albania, and I went to college in Minnesota, University of Minnesota, where I did engineering. Shortly after, did a gig in consulting for about 1.5 years, and then a little bit of marketing analytics, and later on, moved to consulting in grad school, and currently looking into actually both consulting and data analytics. So a mix of the two would be ideal. And my mentor is Max, who's a analyst at McKinsey, and yeah, very excited to be here.
Awesome. Thanks, Fabio. Jem, why don't we go ahead with you?
Sure. So my name is Jem. It's written with a C, but it's pronounced with a J. Just standard. I always say that because people get confused. And I'm actually Turkish. I grew up in Istanbul and briefly in Bulgaria, and then was at the East Coast for a little bit, and then came to Cal for college. And I actually met Kevin at Cal, and then met Nick through him. And so I pretty much spent 4 years during my undergrad time, besides taking classes, just doing research, because I was very convinced that I was going to do a PhD. But after Berkeley just sort of ran through you, I decided it's nice to take up some break, go to industry. So I've been actually working at Apple in sort of doing distributed systems, data, big data analysis, and machine learning, working on more of the systems and framework side of problems for about 3 years now. Recently decided to get my master's degree, so I'm actually a master's student in Berkeley again, but I'm still a full-time employee at Apple. So it's kind of going in between. What else? I think, yeah, that's about all for me. But if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask me afterwards.
Great, awesome. Thanks, Jem. Last but not least, Josh, one of you, I think you might be muted. But,
yeah, I'm Josh Gutman. I went to school with Tyson. I was also class 2006 at Caltech. I studied computer science. I had one normal software job after school, went to work in trading at a high frequency trading firm called Virtu. Well, wasn't Virtu then, but eventually became Virtu Financial. I was there for 9 years, and I took a break, and more recently I am the chief of staff at a gaming technology startup called Gilded.
Awesome. And so I think many of you, or those of you who are on the call, know that Edith Fellowship is about a mentorship community and partnering with a mentor like Tyson, Josh, or Jem. So I thought it would be good if we went over a little bit about what mentorship has been like in your life, your career, your schooling background so far, just from the panelist perspective. So why don't we start with Josh and we can work from there.
Yeah, before my professional career, I don't think I really ever had like a great long-term mentor, but I kind of always look back and feel like it's strange how many decisions I made for myself at the age of 16, 18, 20. Kind of wish I had someone who could bounce back and forth questions. Professional side, I definitely had, more senior people I worked with that kind of gave me, at least soft guidance about how to improve. But, always wish I kind of had someone who I could try to like figure out what I really wanted and kind of how to achieve my goals.
Awesome. And then Tyson, you wanna go ahead?
Yeah, I think it was similar for me. I think the school that that Josh and I graduated to come from, I want to say when we graduated, probably about half the people went on to get PhDs. And so there wasn't really much mentorship or support for people who didn't go into academia or into research-focused things. So, for me, it was also a lot of guessing. I thought I was going to be a math teacher out of school. It's just through a combination of talking to people that found a interesting path. Looking back, definitely mentorship would have helped a lot. I think there are a lot of questions that I had to learn the hard way. And sometimes those are the best way to learn these lessons, but I do think I could have been a little bit more efficient with certain parts of my career. And certainly I think going forward, as questions become more ambiguous and hard to answer, I think that's where mentorship becomes more of a partnership where you're not really answering tactical questions so quickly, but I think as you progress, things go from tactical to a little bit more strategic and more ambiguous. And so that's kind of where I see mentorship going for myself.
Awesome, thanks. And then Jem, what are your perspectives there?
Yeah, I think the earliest I can sort of remember is in high school. I had this really amazing math teacher. So I graduated from Mentorship High School, and the program wasn't really in English. Obviously, we learned English and all that, but it was not really an international school. So people weren't really shooting for SATs and things like that. And my brother and I we were sort of we separated from that, and we decided, what, we're probably not going to go through with the whole national exam prep. And I think the most amazing thing, and like the key point for us making that decision was our math teacher. He realized that early on. It's like, okay, you guys are like not cut out for national universities or this kind of life. You guys should just like try to venture outside a little bit. And then he worked with us, like teaching some of these concepts in English, converting to math and physics and those concepts in English. So there was a really great support from him personally, when there was really no support otherwise. And that kind of stuck with me, that kind of mentorship experience really stuck with me, and I really didn't have any peers that I could ask these questions to. My family didn't really know anything about this process. So when I got to college, I realized, again, I hit kind of like a wall because I didn't really know, again, no one. I didn't really know anyone there. And slowly I started making friends. And those friends essentially became good mentors to me, including some of the grad students that I met during my research time. They sort of became these unofficial mentors, and I actually valued their feedback more than any of the faculty advisors that I've had. And so I think overall, this kind of opened my eyes into mentorship and how it can really change someone's life. Especially like what Tyson said, he really hit the nail on the head there, where things get really ambiguous as you go on with your life, especially in college, where I think it's actually one of the most ambiguous, because you're put in a situation where you don't really know, if there's classes, obviously you have to get really good grades at, but also what about the job, what are you going to do in the future? So once sort of you start asking those questions, you can really go crazy in terms of what you want to do, what you can do, and whether you're going to get a good job or a good research position or whatever you want to do in life. So that's why I feel like having a mentor there really matters. So we can just work together and flesh those things out a little bit.
Awesome, thanks, Jem. And then Fabio, our fellow in the program, what about, how's it been like for you, or how does mentorship play a role in kind of your life?
Yeah, so I was going to echo what Josh said, that I just as well did not have much, many mentors in my life either. I think, and it's okay to say that, right? And I think we should normalize just the same thing. You're not supposed to know in college what you're going to do for the rest of your life. And I had that issue, right? I definitely had a lot of questions. I just didn't know exactly who to ask. And, I would ask my friends and stuff, and I have plenty of friends, right? You'd ask them, but very often we're equally ignorant, right? So I think you'd need someone who's, I'm going to say more senior of you, but at least has been in your shoes and kind of knows. And I think, someone in Josh's level, for example, that would be perfect, right? But yeah, I think this is exactly the reason I decided to apply here in the first place, right? I think I was lacking that. I'm making an active effort to, fill that gap.
Yeah, I think that's a good segue to the next section as well, because I think from what we've heard from talking to fellows or mentors, or that people join the fellowship for different reasons. So, I mean, is there anything else you want to? I guess we could start with you, Fabio, there on joining the fellowship, or if not, we can move on as well.
Yeah. As I said, I'm not the guy who's afraid to ask questions. I just didn't have anybody to ask, right? And you can't really rely on Reddit or the convenience of strangers in LinkedIn. And I think I learned that, kind of the hard way, right? Like people tell you like, yeah, just like talk to people, ask, people on LinkedIn if they want to connect and ask questions, but there's only so much they can really tell you, right? Like usually you'll exchange a few emails with them, maybe a phone call, but then it kind of dies down because at the end of the day, you don't have a strong connection, right? Other than, hey, like, would you answer a question for me? So, I think that's like the main reason. And frankly, I remember talking to Kevin and Nick the first day, and I was like, I like these guys, and I like what they're doing, and I believe in what they're doing. And that's like one of the other reasons why I'm applying, why I did apply, really.
Awesome. Thanks, Fabio. We like having you on. We like having you on as well.
This was not rehearsed, by the way.
Yeah. All right. How about Josh? What has it been like for you, or why did you want to become?
Yeah, I guess the big thing for me was just, thinking back to myself, like in college, was just letting people know that it's okay to like not have all the answers right now and kind of working through those. And I think also it's just really important because when you get advice out there, a lot of it's really generic, and overwhelmingly people will advise you to follow the exact same path they followed. That's like a completely context-free advice. Like I'm sure everyone's parents have some, everyone has parents who tell them the story of like how they got their career and wonder why it doesn't work that way. But yeah, I think it's really helpful to just be there as a resource to let people know that it's okay to like not have everything planned out, but then also try to figure out like how you can start, at least by process of elimination, figuring out what's not going to work for you. It's a good place to start.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And then, Jem, you mentioned you didn't really know that many people when you came here, or you went to Berkeley at least. What were some of the reasons why you wanted to become a mentor on the platform?
Yeah. So I kind of touched base on the previous question, but essentially, by like through seeing these people in my life, like grad students that came in, and some professors here and there, and my friends especially, like I got to know things that I otherwise wouldn't actually necessarily know. For example, I didn't even know. Like, just one great example I always like tell people is I didn't really know that you are supposed to go to career fairs with your resume. I thought you were just like gonna go there and talk to people and have some good time and get out. But my friends and some of my other grad students who are like going to these particular things like told me, no, you should print out your resume. You should really prepare and go prepared. So yeah, that really just I think part of the reason why I joined is because I kind of want to give that back to people. Sort of in a way that they did in my life. And also, if I can help them understand something that they didn't know about, or realize something about their life that they can pursue, I think that's a great feeling to have. Besides that, yeah, I mean, those were really two driving factors on top of like, I knew Kevin and Nick, and I knew that they were working on something like this, and that could give me an opportunity to mentor students. And I thought that would be a great opportunity to do.
Great. Thanks, Jem. And then Tyson, you want to go?
Yeah, definitely. I think for me, there's probably two sides of it. I think one is I enjoy meeting people and talking to people, and I think thinking through these types of problems is fun, right? Like trying to figure out, what are the different mechanics and what are you trying to optimize from, what the best path is. So that's one. The second thing that I think that I enjoy is I enjoy winning in a sense, right? Where I think like, at least especially in the product management field, like there's a pretty well-defined base level of things that people should be doing to try to get these types of roles. And it's, even when I interview people at Google today, it's pretty, it's quite surprising sometimes, like just, some of the basics that people aren't getting when they come in for these interviews. And so, I kind of feel like it's a puzzle that can be solved, and with the right resources, one can solve it. And I think with a mentorship or a fellowship, this fellowship model, I think works really well because with repeated interactions, you can really develop these types of skills, and I think it does a lot more to set someone up for success.
Awesome, thanks. And so, as some of you may have read from the website or not, so we help fund students through what's called like an income share agreement, which is like will help you replace some of your student loans, and actually every single mentor on the platform has contributed to funding that, so that they're kind of invested in your success. So I think it might be interesting to hear some thoughts from the mentors and the fellows what that kind of incentive alignment means for them, and what the ISA kind of represents for them. We can start with Josh and go from there.
I guess I've been like a strong believer in the ISA for a long time. It's kind of a better model in general for financing student debt, and especially for us because, it's not like we have some threshold where as soon as a student can repay, like then we don't have to worry about the loan anymore. We're much more like invested in kind of building like a long-term plan for people that works for them. And
Awesome.
Yeah, I think the long-term aspects are kind of what I think. I think the long-term aspects and the long-term relationship built with the ISA really makes a lot of sense. It really aligns incentives, and I think it's just a more sensible way to structure this type of debt, right? One example here is that when you're looking for a job, I think you can, because you have a longer term relationship, it makes more sense that you can optimize for the right job that will maximize, that's the best trajectory for your career, as opposed to trying to make a minimum payment that, when that clock starts ticking in a traditional loan.
Yeah, that makes sense. How about from a fellow's perspective, Fabio? What did it mean to you, or how did you think about it?
Yeah, I agree. I think the ISA has all the positives of a traditional loan and even more, right? Like traditional loan, there's many more downsides that you don't have here. And in addition, you gain access to mentorship, right? And it's long-term. So I think that's even better. I think even if you do the math, you'd probably be better off getting an ISA. That being said, you should not apply for it just on the financial perspective, right? I think you got to come necessarily with a clear idea of what you want to do, but at least be motivated to do it. And I think given the model that you're going to talk to your, fellow or mentor once a week, I think it puts you in the mindset of thinking of what you want to do and what you want to. I think that's very important as well.
Okay, awesome. And then Jem, you want to go also?
Yeah, sure. I think it's kind of both sides. I do feel like ISA is one of the better ways of tackling student debt, and especially in this current political climate, which I'm not going to get into. We can't really depend on Congress and politicians to just tackle that. So ISA to me is sort of the next best thing, and it also gives gives a student ability to if they have a good idea about what they want to get out of their college life, right, and they only lack resources for funding in this case, I think it allows them to sort of get that kind of resource, so they don't have to worry about money being a factor or a hamper into what they want to do in the future. So I think.
Yeah, that's great. And then I think we touched on this topic with a couple answers, like Tyson's answer and one of Fabio's answers, where like with the fellowship, the goal is that you meet with your mentor for a longer period of time rather than just these one-off conversations on LinkedIn or even a comment on Reddit, right? So I think it might be helpful because sometimes like the fellows or mentors don't even realize like the benefits of that until it starts happening. So it'd be great to hear some of your guys' perspectives on that. Start with Fabio.
Yeah, I wanted to say that, a lot of us, I think, and, talking generics here, but a lot of us may be like either first generation college students or children of immigrants. And it's very hard to find that sort of specific career advice from our parents. And in my case, like when I first explained to my dad what consulting is, he just looked at me as confused and he's like, well, how do you add value? And I was like, I don't know that either, but it is like it's some of these very obscure professions. I don't want to say obscure professions, but to a normal person, they're not really like apparent, right? And in my case, it was either become an engineer and a doctor, and ironically, both me and my brother, that's what we went to school for, right? So I think I never really considered any other field, any field in between, maybe product management, maybe like more finance and analytics, right? And I found that's what I actually like. I love engineering, I love numbers, but I do love a little bit of finance and business in there as well. And I think I never would have considered that before. And maybe had I had access to the right kind of like mentorship through like, if you had an older brother doing that or a parent doing that, you would have. But if you didn't, I think this is the next best thing, at least. You can get that sort of, I want to say, a brotherly advice from someone who's just happens to be also invested in you. And, in both senses of the word, both monetarily and emotionally. I'd hope at least.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And then, I think we can go to Jem next also, because you talked kind of about how your friends were your mentors in college, but what has that experience been like on Edith and off Edith, I guess, as well?
Yeah, I guess I wasn't really involved with too much mentoring during college. I was just really just focused on other stuff. But after college, I actually started mentoring some of the students back in my high school who just somehow found me over at LinkedIn, I guess, or maybe my old high school just like kind of connected me with them. And they were just like, it was on the email about like, applying to Berkeley or other schools in the US. And I started really liking that, they gave me feedback saying that, hey, what you said really helped me even more than our college advisor. And I was like, wow, that kind of feels that feels good about your experience, and it just validates that. But besides that, it was just all sort of offline, right? Like it's email isn't really in a format to mentor someone, and it's nice to have some one-on-one time. And unfortunately, we can't really do face-to-face conversations right now. But still, Edith as a platform just gave me a way to contact someone and or get matched with someone and have that one-on-one time with them as much as possible. And what this sort of created me is this it allowed me to sort of have this be part of their life and sort of like get their or check their heartbeat in terms of how they're doing, like college, how much they're stressed. As a normal advisor should be, I feel like, and or a mentor should be in this case, I feel like, and that's why like that was kind of the experience that I've had so far, and I think it's way better than these like sort of offline feedbacks.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then I think, as I mentioned earlier, Tyson, I think you talked a little bit about like the longer term mentorship, but maybe on like the type of impact you feel like you could have when you talk to or like try and help a student for like a longer period of time rather than like a message on LinkedIn or something like that.
Yeah, definitely with like, short-term communication, there's only so much you can do, right? Like on something that's short-term, it's like, hey, you should structure your resume this way, right? And you can only kind of give feedback that's actionable to a single level. With longer-term mentorship, you can kind of work and really develop better skills, or even on something like just resume development, if you have a bit more time, you can dig deeper into what someone's done and figure out how best to represent their accomplishments on a resume. And I think that extends to all these different, many different aspects, right? Most things, there's very few things that you can do overnight and materially make yourself better, right? Because if it were easy, then everyone would do it, and then by definition, it wouldn't be that useful anymore. So I do think that long term and kind of repeat engagements can help a lot.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I guess we'll finish up with questions with Josh, and then do you have anything to add?
I guess I just feel like the long-term thing is just really important because, like I said, I think like anyone can get like generic advice, and if you just talked with someone once, it's going to be the most generic form of advice. A lot of people have maybe some idea or maybe no idea of like what they'd like to do and how they'd like to get there, but they don't really know what are the difference between work environments? What do I want? Like there are people happy working at all kinds of different places, but trying to figure out what works for you and how to kind of set yourself up to, not just have a career like where you literally have a job at a place, but like, make it sustainable for you, set yourself up for enjoyment, make you, how do you go in as clear-eyed as possible when you do join a place, kind of these like softer things that I feel like people just don't talk about as much, and they're really important, trying to figure out like, how do you, the goal in like getting a job is not to have a job, it's to like be part of, a happy, healthy life, so I think trying to figure out how to like fit that in there and, like make a real plan for that, I think it's just something that you need more time to develop.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, and there's a lot of things that they don't tell you to look out for in school that is good to hear from someone who's gone through it themselves. So I think we've got a decent number of questions that are sent to Kevin, so I want to make sure we have time to answer some of the student questions. So Kevin, I'll hand off the questions to you, and then if anyone thinks of anything else, like I think you can just keep DMing or messaging Kevin and he'll get just as many as he can.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks, Nick, and thanks everyone else for answering all the questions. The panel's been great so far, and even myself, I'm learning a lot about you guys. First question I wanted to ask Tyson from the audience. So Tyson, you mentioned kind of like going from like high frequency trading and then going into like product management and other like software jobs. So could you kind of enlighten us about kind of your process and like your transition through those career paths?
Yeah, definitely. So, when I graduated college, Josh and I were living in the Bay Area. We were both working kind of random jobs. I was in consulting. Josh was in software. A third friend of ours kind of said, "Hey, like let's go work in finance because we'll make a lot of money or something." So, Josh and I actually joined the same hedge fund back in 2007. It was called EWT back then, and then later became Virtu. I moved around a couple different companies. I went out to New York in 2008, and then came back to San Francisco in 2010, continuing to work in high frequency trading. And around 2010, when I was looking at the high frequency trading space, there are kind of three things I'd say that stood out to me. One was that like, I felt the space was getting more competitive. Just more people entering the market meant less opportunity to make money. The second thing was I felt that I was solving the same problem over and over again, right? That like, at least the type of high frequency trading that I was doing, it was a lot of like micro optimization of market structure and market rules. And then the third thing, and this is just something about myself, right? Like I don't have the greatest background in software engineering. And I felt there was a trend where the traders who were working in this industry started to become increasingly technical. I think the second one's probably the main reason why I wanted to get out of high frequency trading, that like I just started getting bored of solving the same problem over and over again. So I was 26 years old and I thought to myself, maybe I should go get an MBA. So a friend of mine had gotten an MBA and he stayed with me because he was interviewing for a product manager position at Zynga. So I thought to myself, oh, maybe if I go get an MBA, I can go get a cool job like him. Again, I didn't have a mentor. I didn't really know any better, right? It turns out that's actually not true. So I was studying for the GMAT, and out of nowhere, this Zynga recruiter contacts me on LinkedIn and says, "Hey, we like your background. Would you be interested in interviewing for a PM position?" And I was like, "Wait, I can do this? I don't need to sink 2 years and $500,000 of opportunity costs into an MBA? Yeah, I'm down." So I pretty much said, "Okay, I'll interview for this position." I stopped studying for the GMAT. I started playing Farmville. I played a lot of Farmville and ended up getting the job at Zynga. And that's how I transitioned to product management. So again, I think it's like this is where mentorship would have helped, right? Like I got really lucky, right? Because I was about to spend 2 years, right? Would have cost me like business school is like 150 grand, $200,000, right? For 2 years. I would have not made money those 2 years. Yeah, it would have been fun. It would have been a great experience, but I didn't really feel like I needed that. So, just this chance message from a recruiter on LinkedIn saved me a lot of time and money.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear. I think like a lot of what we're trying to do is like take a lot of chance out of like your career, like find you the right mentors to partner you with, to help you make like the best decision possible for your career. So that's really awesome to hear that story. So the next question from the audience is kind of around like business and finance and like consulting mentorship in the fellowship. So I think Fabio is great to answer that. So Fabio comes from an engineering background but is looking to break into consulting. So Fabio, can you kind of tell us about like what things that you've been doing with your mentor Max that have been preparing you for, to get into a place like McKinsey or BCG or a company like that?
Yeah. So right out of school, I actually did get I worked in consulting, but it was a very small firm, boutique firm, right? So it definitely did not have the necessary background. So the first thing I did was, and this is on my own as well, right? I started doing more case interviews. I would ask Max. In my case, I wanted to apply to the McKinsey Data Fellow. So it's not just purely consulting. There's more data analytics. I mean, as Max put it, it's basically everything you do in Excel, you do it in Python and R, but you do need a solid foundation in coding, right? So personally, what I started doing is not only doing cases, but a little bit of HackerRank. And I mean, Max was mostly there to answer my questions. I mean, I could do cases with him all day long, but I don't think that would have helped. I think what I used Max the most was asking him questions, asking him what do they focus on specifically, and more details basically on the recruiting process and all that. But then again, I mean, it doesn't have to be specific to the company he works at, right? Like this is still universal. But yeah, that's pretty much been my process for the last month.
Okay, awesome. And actually, this is kind of like a general question about Edith. And like Nick has a lot of like connections in like the private equity, venture capital, and like banking space. So one of the students asked about kind of how we support students within that space. So Nick, can you like talk a little bit more kind of about how we've been helping students that are looking to go into banking and venture capital and finance in general?
Sure. Yeah. So I think the banking space is a lot more structured than venture capital if you're looking to go straight out of undergrad or even out of the master's program. So banking recruiting is generally pretty structured early in the school year. And so the best people to talk to are the first and second year analysts there because they actually play a pretty large role in reviewing the first round resumes, choosing who gets the first round interview, and really like who gets the coffee chats because it goes sequentially, right? You need to network, you get the coffee chat, you submit your resume. If they recognize the name and they like you, you get the first round interview. And if you're not doing that kind of networking, you really need to stand out. Like your resume needs to be exceptional to be chosen. So what we do is we help you connect with those kind of analysts. So we have mentors or people on Edith that work at like Credit Suisse, Morgan Stanley, Deutsche Bank, and places like that, Lazard, if you're interested in boutique banks. And so it's important to hear what they look for because sometimes each firm is looking for something different in terms of what they're judging in your coffee chats. And so depending on where you want to go, whether you want to go to a bulge bracket or a boutique is kind of how we'd match you with a mentor and then get you started early in the process because unfortunately it is a networking industry. And so the earlier you get started and the more people you know personally, the better off you'll be. But yeah, that's kind of how we approach that.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Nick. And then actually another question for Tyson. Tyson, you were talking a little bit about kind of going into the details about like the resume review. So what are some kind of like things that you've been doing with Jeremy to kind of, you were talking about like very general skills that product manager interview people like, or when you interview for product management, like you need to know. So what are kind of like these things that you've been working on with Jeremy to get him up to speed?
So with Jeremy, we haven't done resume review quite yet. For a new grad, the resume is not like, it's not quite as important because you don't have as much experience. With Jeremy, we've been focusing more on what to expect in a associate product manager interview, which generally falls into 3 categories of questions you'll be expected to answer. One is analytical. And in the analytics category, the questions are generally going to come in the form of estimate this or metric X drop by Y% for product Z. How do you diagnose? There's product and design type questions where things are like, tell me about a favorite product, how would you improve it? Or how would you build X for Y? And then finally, there's a behavioral part. And each one of these sections, you kind of have to work on different ways. You have to be prepared to answer what's going to be thrown at you. So what Jeremy and I have been working on is simply, how many ping pong balls fit in a 747? It's a question that everyone's heard of. It was rumored. I think they said that Microsoft used to ask this question. And kind of how you practice these things, from what I've been doing with Jeremy, is that he's been writing his answers down into a Google document, and then we go over it and review them, right? And a question like this, certainly for something you know, how many ping pong balls fit in the 747? Like, okay, we can talk about volume divided by, you know, volume of the airplane divided by volume of a ping pong ball, right? But this question can get a lot more, can get a lot deeper, and that's kind of where what we've been working on now. How do we get deeper into this question? How do you answer this question in a way that really shows that you are, you know, a phenomenal candidate? And then getting so familiar with this idea that you can apply it to other types of subjects. So I'll dive like 15 seconds into like where this goes deeper, right? Like, let's say you actually want to fill a 747 with ping pong balls, right? Like, there are different ways to do this. You know, is this on the passenger plane? I'm just going to fill it up. Or is this like, do I have to do this practically so that the FAA doesn't get pissed at me and so I'm filling up luggage with ping pong balls? Is this plane have to fly anywhere? Because look, the wings have a lot of storage for fuel. Like, can I count that? Am I doing this through a store? Like, am I doing this through a shipping service? So like, is box packing, or am I just like filling this thing, right? Like, anyway, so those are the kind of where it gets deeper, and it really kind of, if you can show that type of thinking in your interview, it really sets you apart from other candidates. But it takes practice before you can do that with something that you haven't heard before.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. I never realized there's so many ways to think about that question. And I'm sure it's like really interesting to discuss this with you on a deeper level as well. Okay, so we have time for 2 more questions. So I'm going to target one for Josh. So Josh, you kind of did the transition from like high frequency trading to startup, and we have some students on the call like interested in kind of like the startup space as well. So kind of how did you like navigate kind of that career path going from like finance and like high frequency trading and like engineering, and then going into like kind of on the operations or like chief of staff at a startup?
Yeah, I mean, it was a little tricky because it was kind of a long-term thing for me. I was trying to find like a really good fit. You know, I kind of have some philosophy, I guess, for like what I was looking for, which is that, you know, I wanted to join a place where I thought there'd be like a lot of opportunity to take on like a lot of responsibility, and that tends to be places that are growing more quickly. Sometimes those are easy to identify. You know, if you were joining Facebook in 2009 or Google in, you know, whatever, like even still like 2006, 2007, you know, so I was kind of on the lookout for that, and just kind of regularly browsing things like fundraising announcements, you know, occasionally product launches, things like that. And then I was putting feelers out there, trying to figure out if I could reach out directly, or did I have any contacts? Could I browse LinkedIn or Twitter and see who I could reach out to there? You know, people are pretty responsive if you don't mind getting some no's or some ignoring people, but it's a valuable skill to be willing to cold contact people and make requests. So this ended up coming through actually someone, like an indirect introduction to someone Tyson introduced me to a while ago in a totally different context, and that ended up being a helpful introduction to kind of getting my name in a way that, like, you know, could fit for the role I was looking for, because they weren't necessarily hiring for it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, awesome. Good to hear. Like kind of like that like network that you've built up over time is like very valuable. And hopefully, like I guess like over time, like as the Edith network grows, these connections and like relationships that you've built, or like people build on the platform, become valuable over time as well. And then for the final question, Jem, you work kind of in the like machine learning data science space in Apple, very interesting and hot field, and like a lot of people want to work at big companies like Apple. If you had kind of like quick advice about like how to break into like that machine learning data science at a big company, what's kind of the advice for students there?
Let's see. So I guess it's a little bit different from what I what I would tell myself, because I broke into this whole machine learning data science space because I was always really interested in the mathematical aspects of computer science rather than the, you know, just the software engineering aspects of computer science. So I started taking a lot of like stats and math courses and sort of diverged out from the whole X curriculum. And it was a very lonely path. So I would say, first of all, if you're going to do that, if you're interested in these kind of problems, start taking more math and stats courses. I would call them like more fundamental courses while you're in college, even though they're going to be, you know, totally different from your department, whatever you're doing, and even though your department advisors might not like that. In my case, they didn't, and I got into a lot of trouble with that. And also like start looking at start thinking as like I guess as a data scientist or a data engineer in a way that start getting dirty with data. And what I mean by that is there's so many tools out there available. For example, Google Research has this thing called Collab that I've been telling people about. It's a great way to enter this space. It's basically like an IPython notebook where you can just like download a data set from Kaggle, or Kaggle is like an open source platform to train models. And you can just get really dirty with that kind of data. And that will essentially, I feel like, will give you an opportunity to sort of understand this space a little bit more, and see, like, you know, you'll as you deal with problems relating to data, you'll see, like, you know, how much of your time is spent on cleaning, collecting versus actually doing the analysis. And maybe you'll actually stumble upon something cool with that data. And I think that's kind of what made me really get into this kind of space. I like Fabio said, I really like numbers, and I really like seeing trends and patterns, especially latent patterns in data. And that's sort of how I started. So I would recommend people to just like take a look at like, you know, Kaggle data sets or Kaggle competitions, even though they might really seem really obscure or very hard to do. There are so many great IPython notebooks there, or like notebooks there that you can just like copy and paste it on a collab space and go through how they did it to solve that particular problem. Which will give you an idea of like the space. And then maybe you can actually build more on top of that using the classes that you're taking, and then start taking a look at some of the harder problems, harder projects. Who knows, maybe that'll actually give you more projects to do in hackathons or you know, whatever class you're taking, and you can put it on your resume. And once you get out of college, you can talk about that, because when I interview people, one thing that comes up from their resume, especially if they're new grad engineers, are the projects that they did. And if they're from Berkeley, I just zoom past the class projects, because if the only project they put on the resume are the class projects, then they didn't really do anything themselves. So having a passion for that kind of space, or this whole like data space, gives you a nice springboard to what can come next. You know, whether that be a research position or a software engineering position or a data science position or a data engineering position. I would say first get really dirty in that kind of space, and then once you're more comfortable in it, start doing projects, and hopefully start looking at some interview problems, and then I'm sure that'll lead to something.
Awesome, Dan. Yeah, definitely can tell like your passion for like the data space, and like I've seen you work on so many projects outside of work and kind of in your own time as well. So that's about time for the call. So if you're a student interested in applying and kind of like hearing about this kind of mentorship, drop your application at edithlabs.com/apply. So the applications are due this Friday. We'll accept them on a rolling basis, but the earlier you get it in, the better. And I know we have some mentors on the call. Like if you haven't reached out yet, definitely reach out to Nick or I, and we'll get in touch and kind of walk through the process of becoming a mentor. And I think all you guys have really gotten a lot of like the just building these like long-term relationships through Edith, and really appreciate the time you guys took to help us out at Edith and also help us out with the panel. So thanks everyone else for also hopping on the call. So
Thanks, Tyson. Thanks, Josh. Thanks, Fabio and Jen. See you guys.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.